Assalamu alaikum. In this lecture, we are going to discuss Matthew Arnold as a critic. First of all, what is the introduction of Matthew Arnold? He was English Victorian poet and a social critic. He was born near the end of the Romantic era in 1822 and died near the beginning of modernism in 1888. So he was a teacher, literary critic, poet, and a prose writer. He is a type of writer who criticizes and instruct the reader on contemporary social issues. Third great Victorian poet. He was great Victorian poet along with Alfred Lord Tennyson and Robert Browning. He was the bridge between Romanticism and Modernism. So he was also called as father of modern literary criticism. Matthew Arnold was the eldest son of renowned Thomas Arnold. He was the headmaster of the Rugby's. So he got his early education from Rugby's and then he attended the Oxford as a scholar of Balliol and Balliol College, and there he won a new Digest Prize with his poem Commonwealth. Okay? And in 1847, he became a private secretary to Lord Arnold because he had to uh, he had to save money. He had to earn income to get married with Frances Lucy Whiteman. So he was engaged in incessant traveling throughout the British provinces because he was a scholar. He's mostly his poems, his writings focuses on the education, on the theme of education and society. So he was sent by the government into various states like France, Germany, Holland, Switzerland. Two of his reports were also reprinted as a books because on a state of education on a schools at home attracted wide attention, and he was in Arnold's own urban and civilized prose. It was these reports on school were in the prose. His famous works are Dover Beach, Scholar Gypsy, and Cherub. In all these, the function of criticism at present time and the study of poetry are most important. Then, what are the principles? The most important things about Arnold? What are his principles? He said poetry is the greatest human activity. For Arnold, poetry is humankind's crowning activity. Poetry can provide the necessary truths, values, and guidelines for society. From Aristotle's Poetics, Arnold adapts this idea that the best poetry is of a higher truth and seriousness than any other human subject or subjectivity. Then the second principle is return to classical values. He was a modern poet and he should be aware that contemporary literature is built on a foundation of the past and should contribute to the future by continuing a firm tradition. Replication of classical criteria to literature is fundamental to Arnold's literary criticism. He urged modern poets to look to the ancients and their great characters and themes for guidance and inspiration. He quotes and borrows his ideas from Plato, Aristotle, Longinus, and other classical writers in his works of criticism. The next principle is the criticism in Arnold's view. In his book, The Function of Criticism at Present Time, he said that criticism is the dissemination of ideas, a disinterested endeavor to learn and propagate the best that is known and thought in the world. Arnold gave the most comprehensive definition of the criticism, which is in this bold. According to him, the best that is known and thought in the world is criticism. This is the main point, and this is the main heading of this definition. Thus, the social role of criticism is to create a current of true and fresh ideas. He says that when evaluating a work, in the aim is to see the object as in itself it really is. Psychological, historical, and sociological backgrounds are irrelevant in criticism. The fourth is role of a critic. What is the role of a critic? To Arnold, a critic is a social benefactor. Arnold decreed the critic to be the preserver of a society's values. To accomplish this goal, the critic must avoid becoming embroiled in politics or any other activities that would lead to a form of bias. For the critic must view society disinterestedly, keeping aloof from the world's mundane affairs. In his book, The Study of Poetry, he cautions the critic that in forming a genuine and disinterested estimate of the poet under consideration, he should be influenced by historical or personal judgments. The next principle is touchstone theory. His touchstone theory. This method of criticism is comparative for Arnold to judge whether a poem is good poetry. The critic's task is to have always in one's mind lines and expressions by the great masters and to apply them as a touchstone to other poetry. By comparing new written lines to classical poetry that contains elements of the sublime, the critic will know whether the new poem is good or bad. The next is morality. As a critic, Arnold is essentially a moralist and has very definite ideas about what poetry should be and should not be. A poetry of revolt against moral ideas, he says, is a poetry of revolt against life, and a poetry of indifference to moral ideas is a poetry of indifference to life. He asserts that true greatness in poetry is given by the truth and seriousness of its subject matter and by the high diction and movements in its style and manner. He says that poetry has nobility of subject matter and superiority of style and manner. His contributions to literature is he was recognized as spokesperson for Victorian England and its literature. He separated both critic and poet in order to create a type of poetry and criticism. He explored themes of culture, society, and human conditions. He played a key role in shaping literary criticism during his time. His critical essays, such as Cultural Anarchy and Function of Criticism at Present Time, explored the importance of culture, education, and the role of the critic in society. So, overall, Matthew Arnold's contribution to literature are marked by his insightful criticism, thought provoking poetry, and his role in shaping the Victorian literature. And his works continue to be studied and appreciated for their enduring relevance and artistic manner. Thank you.